Let's get some analysis now of what the government calls its Future Made in Australia policy. There was a significant speech given this week by the former Competition Chief Rod Sims. He's now the chair of the Superpower Institute. He joins me now. Rod, thanks for your time. I was really interested in your analysis when it comes to the government's Future Made in Australia approach. You said it needs to have clear, essentially, if you can clear it up for me, but basically clear guardrails to ensure the spend is appropriate and that we don't stymie our chances to be a superpower in clean energy.
That's exactly right, Kieran. These are crucial debates because we've got some important things we're talking about here. It's how do we maximise climate action and how do we underpin Australia's prosperity? And there's ways to do both of those at once, which is the good news. So in that speech, I talked about various groups. One group is people who don't want the government to do anything, just stay out of the way. Well, that's a bit hard when you've got, hopefully, goods produced without any emissions competing with goods that are produced with a lot of emissions. That's an unfair playing field. The government has a role to play there. So there's various reasons why the government should intervene, particularly given this large transition. And I was trying to therefore criticise heavily those who don't want any intervention. When it comes to the government's Made in Australia, which is really your question, it's really trying to understand what that's trying to achieve. What's its guardrails? Because if you don't explain that, you can have people thinking it's the worst of some of the past policies we've had in the past. It's inward focused, whereas the whole Hawke-Keating reforms, of course, were all about an external focused economy and how does Australia position to be that. And I think if Australia is going to maximise its prosperity and its contribution to the world emission reduction, it needs to be outward.
And you argue as well that without a clear framework, you can promote and foster rent seeking from business.
Well, I think people listening to it need to understand what the guardrails are, what's the framework we're working within, and the government as a whole needs to get that clear itself. Otherwise, people will rock up to it and start lobbying for this, that, and the other in ways that don't fit within a coherent whole, and so you end up spending money on things that aren't very helpful and don't advance the Australian economy, and indeed cost the Australian economy. I mean, just to take one example, if we insisted that all future solar panels or wind farms have got to be completely made in Australia, then they're going to make them very expensive, and that's going to make it very hard for Australia to be the exporter of green iron and green aluminium and green fertiliser, products that can see more goods made in Australia, a lot more goods made in Australia, but that will be frustrated if we go about it the wrong way.
And so basically you want the government, you're saying there is a role for government, yes, but it needs to focus and have a laser-like focus in some respects on what we are good at, where we have comparative advantage, basically.
Correct. There's much the government needs to do to help us realise that comparative advantage in a fast-changing world. And the net zero world creates comparative advantage in a whole lot of sectors because we have this abundant source of low-cost renewable energy. We have also the possibility of making carbon in a sustainable way. We really are, just like we in the old days, are privileged with coal and gas, which was fantastic for Australia. Going forward, we're privileged with fantastic sunshine, wind, and they don't need 24/7 power. These are industrial facilities. So let's just take advantage of that. That would be fantastic for Australia.
Former ACCC chair, now chair of the Superpower Institute, Rod Sims, great to get your insights. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen.